Chapter 4, What is Duty? Part 2. Chastity is the first virtue in man or woman, and the man who, however he may have strayed away, cannot be brought to the right path by a gentle and loving and chaste wife is indeed very rare. The world is not yet as bad as that. We hear much about brutal husbands all over the world and about the impurity of men. But is it not true that there are quite as many brutal and impure women as well? If all women were as good and pure as their own constant assertions would lead one to believe, I am perfectly satisfied that there would not be one impure man in the world. What brutality is there which purity and chastity cannot conquer? A good chaste wife who thinks of every other man except her own husband as her child and has the attitude of the mother towards all men will grow so great in the power of her purity that there cannot be a single man, however brutal, who will not breathe an atmosphere of holiness in her presence. Similarly, every husband must look upon all women except his own wife in the light of his own mother or daughter or sister. That man again who wants to be a teacher of religion must look upon every woman as his mother and always behave towards her as such. The position of the mother is the highest in the world, as it is the one place in which we learn and exercise the greatest unselfishness. The love of God is the only love that is higher than a mother's love. All others are lower. It is the duty of a mother to think of her children first and then of herself. But instead of that, if the parents are always thinking of themselves first, the result is that the relation between parents and children becomes the same as that between birds and their offspring, which, as soon as they are fledged, do not recognize any parent. Blessed indeed is the man who is able to look upon woman as a representative of the motherhood of God. Blessed indeed is the woman to whom man represents the fatherhood of God. Blessed are the children who look upon their parents as divinity manifested on earth. The only way to rise is by doing the duty next to us, and thus gathering strength go on until we reach the higher state. A young sannyasi went to a forest. There he meditated, worshipped, and practiced yoga for a long time. After years of hard work and practice, he was one day sitting under a tree when some dry leaves fell upon his head. He looked up and saw a crow and a crane fighting on the top of the tree, which made him very angry. He said, "What? Dare you throw these dry leaves upon my head?" As with these words he angrily glanced at them, a flash of fire went out of his head. Such was the yogi's power, and burnt the birds to ashes. He was very glad, almost overjoyed at this development of power, that he could burn the crow and the crane by the look. After a time, he had to go to the town to beg his bread. He went, stood at the door, and said, "Mother, give me food." A voice came from inside the house. "Wait a little, my son." The man thought, "You wretched woman, how dare you make me wait? You do not know my power yet." While he was thinking thus, the voice came again. "Boy, don't be thinking too much of yourself. Here is neither crow or crane." He was astonished, still he had to wait. At last the woman came, and he fell at her feet and said, "Mother, how did you know that?" She said, "My boy, I do not know your yoga or your practices. I am a common everyday woman. I made you wait because my husband is ill and I was nursing him. All my life I have struggled to do my duty. When I was unmarried, I did my duty to my parents. Now that I am married, I do my duty to my husband. That is all the yoga I practice. But by doing my duty, I have become illumined. Thus I could read your thoughts and know that you had what you had done in the forest. If you want to know something higher than this, go to the market of such and such a town where you will find a Vyadha who will tell you something that you will be very glad to learn." A sannyasi thought, "Why should I go to that town and to a Vyadha?" But after what he had seen, his mind opened a little, so he went. When he came near the town, he found the market and there saw at a distance a big fat Vyadha cutting meat with big knives, talking and bargaining with different people. The young man said, "Lord, help me. Is this the man from whom I am going to learn? He is the incarnation of a demon, if he is anything. In the meantime, this man looked up and said, "O Swami, did that lady send you here? Take a seat until I have done my business." The sannyasi thought, "What comes to me here?" He took his seat. The man went on with his work, and after he had finished, he took his money and said to the sannyasi, "Come, sir, come to my home." On reaching home, the Vyadha gave him a seat, saying, "Wait here," and went into the house. He then washed his old father and mother, fed them, and did all he could to please them, after which he came to the sannyasi and said, "Now, sir, you have come here to see me. What can I do for you?" The sannyasi asked him a few questions about soul and about God, and the Vyadha gave him a lecture which forms a part of the Mahabharata called the Vyadha Gita. It contains one of the highest flights of the Vedanta. When the Vyadha finished his teaching, the sannyasi felt astonished. He said, "Why are you in that body? With such knowledge as yours, why are you in a Vyadha's body and doing such filthy, ugly work?" "My son," replied the Vyadha, "no duty is ugly, no duty is impure. My birth placed me in these circumstances and environments. In my boyhood, I learned the trait. I am unattached and I try to do my duty well. I try to do my duty as a householder, and I try to do all I can to make my father and mother happy. I neither know your yoga, nor have I become a sannyasi, nor did I go out of the world into the forest. Nevertheless, all that you have heard and seen has come to me through the unattached doing of the duty which belongs to my position. There is a sage in India, a great yogi, one of the most wonderful men I have ever seen in my life. He is a peculiar man. He will not teach anyone. If you ask him a question, he will not answer. It is too much for him to take up the position of a teacher. He will not do it. If you ask a question and wait for some days, in the course of conversation, he will bring up the subject, the one and wonderful light will he throw on it. He told me once the secret of work. Let the end and the means be joined into one. When you are doing any work, do not think of anything beyond. Do it as worship, as the highest worship, and devote your whole life to it for the time being. Thus, in the story, the Vyadha and the woman did their duty with cheerfulness and wholeheartedness, and the result was that they became illuminated, clearly showing that the right performance of the duties of any station of life, without attachment to results, leads us to the highest realization of the perfection of the soul. It is the worker who is attached to results that grumbles about the nature of the duty which has fallen to his lot. To the unattached worker, all duties are equally good and form efficient instruments with which selfishness and sensuality may be killed and the freedom of the soul secured. We are all apt to think too highly of ourselves. Our duties were determined by our deserts to a much larger extent than we are willing to grant. Competition rouses envy, and it kills the kindliness of the heart. To the grumbler, all duties are distasteful. Nothing will ever satisfy him, and his whole life is doomed to prove a failure. Let us work on, doing as we go whatever happens to be our duty, and being ever steady to put our shoulders to the wheel. Then surely shall we see the light.